But as a Prime Minister, I was a guest of the French government and had a discussion with a French minister for energy, water and high seas, Monsieur Balou. And while I was having a discussion with Monsieur Balou, he surprised me. He told me, Mr. Odinga, you know, Africa is a dark continent. I asked him, what does this man, what do you mean? Because, you know, we have been fighting the description of a political dark continent. He told me, I'll show you how. So he produced an atlas. He showed me, look, this is how Europe looked like at night from the satellite. So you could see the European city lit, all the places there, light everywhere. Then he produced another map. He said, this is how Africa looked like at night from the satellite. In Africa, you could see some light in the south there, and then nothing else, and later in Egypt there, but nothing else in the rest of the continent. So he said, when Europe is working at night, Africa is dead asleep. No wonder you have a very high rate of population. That's all that. So I said, look, this one here, I can talk about a political dark continent, but this one here is a reality. And the only way to deal with it is by lighting Africa. And he started what we call Paris African Initiative, where we are working how to help African countries to deal with green energy issues. Africa has got an abundance of solar energy potential around, of wind energy, and hydro, which are not being used properly. And Africa has not been able to benefit from the climate fund, which is available. And this will be concluding with seeing an area where I see the Yale University actually working together with Africa in this field of green energy. There's need for more action to ensure the flow of FDIs to finance Africa's infrastructure deficit. Here, I can mention what I usually call the elephant in the room, which is China. Everybody talks about China. Now, I've been saying that China is in Africa not to help to develop Africa. But China is in Africa for Chinese own strategic self-interest. And every country acts usually in its own strategic self-interest. So it says China is filling a vacuum which has been left away by traditional African traditional partners in developing Africa's infrastructure. It's helping Africa to develop the ports, the railways, the roads, the airports, in exchange for Africa's raw materials, and so on. So it is not like something that is altruistic to basically just help Africa. Now, we have not done enough to rein in the cancers of corruption, tribalism, nepotism, and patronage. You know, tribalism, I say, is usually a disease of the elite. The elite, in the competition for scarce resources in the country, resort to their ethnic origins to discriminate against their fellow elites. And this is, but this has been confounded by the history. Like it is more found in former Anglophone, in the Anglophone Africa more than Francophone. Because the British, in pursuit of their policy of divide and rule, at the sunset of their rule, were trying to bring communities against each other. And that is what has actually survived even in the post-colonial era in Africa. But also it has to do with the leadership that took over power in most of these African countries. But I have mentioned also the consolidation of power after independence, when the opposition was extinguished. Then there were no checks and balances in the system, and corruption became center stage. And the leadership surrounded itself by the elite from its own ethnic community. So corruption became a vogue, part of the day. Corruption, by the way, exists virtually everywhere. The oldest crime, even even you find it in the Bible. But even in this country, there's corruption. The only difference is that if it is detected, then something is done about it. So I'm talking about systemic corruption, which you found in some of the African countries. So we say it's something that we must confront directly, because corruption diverts resources from the public coffer to private hands. And it must be managed. I keep on giving an example of an African minister of roads who went on a tour to visit he was invited by his Malaysian counterpart to visit Malaysia. So when he went there, he was taken around the country, he was shown around the roads. And the roads were very well done. Very well, highly tarmacked, nice dual carriage highways. In the evening, he was invited for dinner in the residence of his host. And when he came in, the compound was a 1 acre compound, nicely done lawn. There was a nice swimming pool. And inside the house, the lounge was nice sofa set. Everything was neatly done. So he asked his host, how did you achieve all this? And the host took him to the balcony and showed him a highway somewhere and said, you see that road there? Yes. He said, 10% here. So 1 year later, it was the turn for the Malaysian minister to pay his African minister a return visit. When he went, again he was taken around to look at the roads, and the roads were in very poor state. Even those which had been tarmacked were potholed. Some of them were earth roads. Then in the evening, he was invited for dinner at the residence of his host. And when he came in here, he found it was a 5 acre compound. And next to it, there was a golf course. And then inside here, there was an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Then the sofa sets were all imported from Europe. The China was all imported, very expensive. So he asked his counterpart, how did you achieve all this? He was taken to the balcony. And he was shown that road there. The Malaysian could see no road. Then the gentleman said, 100%, yeah. That is the difference. between the levels of corruption. I would say that Africa is losing 148 billion annually because of corruption. The amount is equivalent to 25% of Africa's gross domestic product. Corruption is responsible for the increase in the cost of goods in Africa by 20%, as corrupt public officials receive between 20 and 40 billion in bribes annually, which is equivalent to 20 to 40% of official development assistance. We must tackle inequality as a matter of priority. Inequality and lack of opportunities for those at the bottom threatens the future of everyone and can actually bring down nations. Without attention to the issue of equity, growth will continue being mistaken for progress, and Africa's journey to the future shall remain uncertain. There are some disturbing signs in this regard, and we can see, I've seen some of these wars in Central African Republic, in Mali, South Sudan. Then we had the Arab Spring in Tunisia and Egypt. But I want to say that we generally remain hopeful that despite some of those setbacks, a lot of progress has been made on the continent, and a lot still requires to be done. Finally, Africa's future must be the responsibility of its leaders and its citizens. Africa has changed, but Africa must continue changing. The change must be fast, broad, and deep enough to match the rest of the world and the expectations of our young people. Experiences of the past 20 years have shown us what works and what does not. So we have a reason not to fail again. It is my hope that the relationship which we are cementing with the U.S. Will be beneficial, as it has been, to both countries. And that this is not going to be just a scramble and competition for resources. We hope for a true partnership that carries both Africa and the U.S. forward, that has been the case in the past. But let me finish the story by again reciting a story I told you about the lion at the beginning. But what I'm talking about here is the story of the African lion. And this is a message of the African lion to the Asian tiger. But you, Asian tiger, have danced on the stage for far too long alone. I have been asleep in the equatorial forests. The European bear retreated to the North Pole a long time ago. And the American bison or buffalo is rushing into the Atlantic and the Pacific. But I am now awake as the African lion. And I don't want to let you continue dancing alone on the stage. I'm bounded by the mighty rivers Nile, the Congo, the Gambia, the Niger, the Limpopo, and the Zambezi. I've been sleeping in the huge equatorial forest of the Congo. I'm sitting on the African gold, African diamond, the African bauxite, the African oil, the African iron ore. I have what it takes to rise up and be as great as you are. And I will not let you dance alone on this stage. Before we are long